Welcome to the Wolf and the Doctor podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Curry, alongside my co-host, Dr. John Devereaux.
And as you guys know, we always start the episode out with one of our quotes for the week. And the quote for this week comes from Mark Twain. And that is, "The secret of getting ahead is getting started." Oftentimes we hear people saying, they have a difficult time getting their businesses off the ground. So that's one of the things that we want to focus on this episode. So Glenn, before we dive any deeper, first off, let's give our listeners a little bit of background information on some of the businesses that we either, currently operate or have operated in the past. Now, I know you, as you mentioned before, are like a jack of all trades. So tell us a little bit about some of those businesses that you had.
I started off doing the photography, and the photography was super cool. I started off in college. I remember you introduced me to the whole photography industry. It was like super new to me. And eventually, my hobby that I was doing in college then turned into something I could be profitable off of later on. So fast forward, a couple of years later, I started to specialize in a couple of areas. I started to do corporate photos. I did headshots, corporate headshots, corporate events. I mean, you name it, in those specialized fields, because that was where my passion lied at the time. But then over the years, I kind of fell in love with real estate, and that's what kind of drove me. It was taking that side business that was real estate at the time, and I actually made that into my full-time profession.
And that's interesting that you were able to do that. And not to put your business out there, I know real estate is paying very well for you.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But it's interesting as you kind of, talk about your story, how you were able to take those passions and then, make it profitable. One of the things that my wife always says is, to make your passion your paycheck, find things that you're interested in and then find ways to make money off of it. Now, like for me personally, I got started with photography as well back in college. That's when I at least started my business. But the passion for photography and graphic art was instilled in me at a very young age. So over time, I was just able to kind of, develop my skills to be able to do it as a business and move from being just a hobby. But outside of that, similar to you, I started to find my niche, going from just being like a general, I'll take, when we both started, I think, we take pictures of everything. Like it didn't matter what the event was, getting paid like $20 to do sessions. But eventually over time, started to kind of scale it back a little bit. Now, I'm the owner of Deviation Photo Solutions, where I specialize in doing photo booths primarily. And I'll occasionally do events such as weddings, but I mainly focus on like the photo booths. And then I also added drone photography to my business. So I still own and operate, my side business. But Glenn, you said that, with your photography, it's kind of phased out as you started doing more of the real estate. So was that easy to give up? Because I mean, you did say that you were kind of passionate about it. So,
I mean, no, bro, that was probably like one of the hardest things I had to do, right? But I had to make a decision on, is this something that I can see myself doing long term, or is this something that's just profitable and just kind of like keeping my attention for the meantime? And I think that was probably one of the toughest decisions that I had to make. But what I did learn though from that first business was how to scale, right? How to scale the business, how to market, how to add value to my business. I think that was one of the main things one of the main takeaways that I took from having that first business. But the real estate, I think, is where my passion actually really lied, right? And I wanted to put all my eggs in one basket. I didn't want to shortchange anything that I was doing. So the decision was hard, but it was necessary. And once I made that decision, it was probably the best thing that I could do. And that's really how my career kind of took off.
when you were getting started, because like I mentioned, oftentimes people have this fear of getting started, did you have any type of, hesitation when it came to like actually starting your business?
I think getting started is always hard, man. It's because you just don't know where to start. It's like you see all these other great photographers, right, doing all these great and amazing things. And you like, yo, I like this, I like this, I like this. And you want to implement that into your business, but sometimes it just doesn't work. And I think that that's the trouble that people have, right? They're comparing themselves to different people in their industry. And that right there hindered me at first from even getting started. because I'm trying to match what these professionals that's been doing it for 10, 15 years are doing.
And that's an
It,
interesting point because especially like in the photography business where,
yeah,
as a photographer, your creative vision
yeah,
is unique to yourself. I remember you always tell the story, but
yeah.
I remember when you first started photography and you were learning how to edit photos, and you
Mhm.
came to me, I was like, "Yo, can you teach me how to do
Yeah.
Photoshop or how to use Photoshop?" You go ahead and tell the story. You tell a lot better
Yeah,
than
I
I do.
remember. Yeah, I remember, man. I say, John, because you're a lot more advanced at the time than I was, and I say, John, man, can you teach me how to do this Photoshop? You was like, no, and I think it
I'm
broke
sure I
my
didn't say
heart,
it that
man.
rude.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that's how I felt it, man. And I was like, man, like, why not? And you never told me why not. But then later on, you was like, yo, if I taught you what it is that I do, you'll only see it through my eyes. So
Mhm.
that kind of opened the doors for me where it's like, yo, I can't mimic what John does. I have to find my own niche. I have to find my own vision. And because you did that, it really, really shaped the way my whole photography business was.
Exactly. And it's really interesting like how we both started at the same place. And
Yeah.
we've shot in a couple
Yeah.
weddings together. I don't
Oh,
know if
yeah.
shot's a word, but we shot a couple weddings together and we've
Yeah.
done a few events together as well. But it's interesting
Yeah.
how our paths kind of diverged over time into different
Hmm.
areas. And
Yeah.
I think as an entrepreneur, you start to learn your skill set. And then if you stay true to your skill set, that'll naturally lead you to the area that you're supposed to be operating in. So it's just really cool. But I think, like you mentioned, if you limit yourself to somebody else's perception of how your business should be, then all you're going to do is just become a clone of that person. And we're all
Absolutely.
unique individuals. And I think that simple analogy of, with photography just tends to, incorporate how, entrepreneurship is as a whole. You don't never want to be a replica of somebody else because if you and somebody are doing the same thing, that means one of you guys are unnecessary.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah. And
that's how I think about it.
I think it goes back to that episode that we had with Tempest. And she mentioned that she doesn't really read other authors' novels. And it was interesting to me on why, but she said because she doesn't want to get influenced indirectly from their work when she's writing her own material. So I think it just goes back to your career, photography, whatever. If you're starting to look at it's good to get inspiration, but it's
Yeah.
not good to look at theirs and want to mimic it, right? Because like you
Inspiration,
said,
not replication.
yeah,
That's what I'm getting
inspiration.
from what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead and expound on that a little bit.
So it's okay to be inspired by somebody, but you don't want to become a replication, of them, because I think everybody has skills that are unique to themselves. And if you're trying to replicate somebody, that could diminish your capacity or your ability to, walk in your own potential and fulfill your own purpose. But we were talking with some of our listeners who responded to one of our questions on Instagram, and they mentioned like this fear of getting started, which has kind of spurred this topic on this episode. But what place does fear have in your business or as how you operate as an entrepreneur?
For me, fear is at the top of my business. It's a necessity, right? And the reason I say that is because without fear, I wouldn't get up in the morning. The fear of not making it, the fear of failing, all of that is what drives me, right? The fear of not being successful, the fear of not providing for my family, all of that, right? So fear is a necessity, and it's a much needed thing when you're talking about becoming successful, when you're talking about career, because without it, that's the only thing that's going to drive you. That's the only thing that's going to push you.
So I love the way that you put that because you're never going to get rid of fear. So you might as well use it to your advantage. You have to be more afraid of not achieving the outcome than the actual work or the process that you have to go through. When we think about like starting a business, a lot of times we have people who say, well, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I don't have the resources. I don't know where to start. So you'll come up with every excuse, in the world to not get something started. And that's not to say that those excuses don't have any validity, but those excuses don't necessarily lead to results.
Yeah.
So the important thing is to kind of shift that focus from what will it take for me to succeed given my current circumstances rather than letting those current circumstances dictate you from getting started in the first place.
I think it's all about the mindset too, man. It's all about just putting yourself out there. Just get started and just see, what happens if you put yourself out there. What would you learn?
Let me
you
let me
know.
give you a quick example because that just reminded me of how I actually got started in the photo booth business.
Okay.
So at this time, I was primarily doing, just photography, weddings, engagement shoots, things like that. So somebody reached out to me, was like, "Hey, can you do a photo booth?" And granted, I've never done one in my business at all before up to that point, and I was like, "Yeah, I can." So, so I was like, the whole thing was like, okay, well, let me accept the job and then figure it out along the way. And that goes back to like we were talking about last episode with like that growth mindset. So
Yeah.
I was like, I'm sure I can do it. What's the worst
Yeah.
that could happen? So I eventually, accepted the gig, and then I figured out how to do it, bought like the requisite materials that I needed. So that birthed like the entire subdivision of like my photo booth business. And it's all because I just accepted the challenge of trying to figure it out. And like you said, I think a lot of times we do overcomplicate things, and, we kind of stress and we just don't get started out of that fear. But one of the things that like I always remember, Will Smith, he was the one who said it. He was like, man, if you're nervous, overcommit. So I'm not sure if you ever heard like the story, but like his first season on like the Fresh Prince, he had never acted before. So he was saying like he was super nervous, and what he did to compensate for that was to overcommit to like the script. So he would say memorize not only his lines but the lines of everybody else in the scene. So like if you go back and watch a lot of those episodes in like the first season, you'll see him on the side kind of mouthing the words of other people. And that's something that I just take with me. Like, anytime I'm nervous, I tend to overcommit because then, muscle memory kicks in, and, you'll start to just naturally act the way that you are supposed to based off of the preparation that you did.
And I think it goes back to like the quote from last week where I said that most entrepreneurs learn 40% of what it is that they need to know, and then they learn the other 60% along the way. You literally did the exact same thing. Like you didn't know what it was that you needed to do, but you learned what it is that was necessary for that job as you went along the ride. So,
Yeah, I think like as an entrepreneur, you always have to be in constant adapt mode, because circumstances are always going to come up, opportunities will always arise, and you got to be able to meet those standards, when they present themselves.
so what about those people out here that think that they can kind of like skip out on the work? What do you got to say about that?
You can never cheat the process. Like, even if you get away with cheating it for a little bit, eventually, it's going to catch up to you. So there's no substitute, I believe, for hard work. You could be as intelligent as you want to be. You can be as, resourceful, but at the end of the day, you're still going to have to put that work in, and there's no getting around it. People don't just suddenly become successful. It's a chain of events, that lead to that success or failure. You know, it comes from doing those day-to-day things. So you can't expect to get to a place that you want to get to if you're not willing to put the work in that it requires.
And you know what, John, that brings me to my next point, right? Is like motivation. Like, what does that even look like?
Motivation falls into two categories, right? You can either be intrinsically motivated, where you receive that gratification from doing something, or you could be extrinsically motivated, where there's external factors that influence you, like, money, adoration, praise, awards, recognition, things like that. So you really need to know yourself in order to see like what are you motivated by. So for me, I'm very intrinsically motivated. I love solving problems. That motivates me to keep doing the work. So don't get me wrong. I like those external motivating factors such as like money and things like that. But that's not what drives me. I'll never stay in a career just for the money. I have to receive some type of internal gratification out of it. And I think that's why I love teaching. They say like, if you want to know what you're truly passionate about, what would you do if you received the lottery? Or what would you do if you never got paid? So that'll help you really eliminate a lot of your career
Yeah.
choices and really focus on those things that really just bring you pure enjoyment and gratification. I think I said it on the first episode. If I were to hit the lottery today, I would still be teaching because I know my purpose lies in helping students in higher education. So, once you find out what your purpose is, your motivation is going to be tied to that.
And I think for me, it's not about the money either. Like the money has very little to do with why I do what I do, right? It's about the game. It's about the game amongst people. So I'm very competitive. You know, on game nights, I'm super competitive. But it's about winning. It's about being able to start from the bottom and then conquer.
So just because, I mean, when you mention like starting from the bottom, you know,
Yeah.
I think, you know, people, I don't know if people really know, like we really know each other, you know,
Yeah,
outside of
yeah.
this podcast. So
Right.
I know about your upbringing and you know about mine as well. And I think sometimes that upbringing and circumstances that we had to go through are also motivators in and of itself. You know, like without getting too deep into it, I think I remember sharing one of the reasons why I'm very passionate about education and helping students, you know, go through college and, you know, succeed in whatever it might be, is because I personally have been like, you know, um, what's the word that I'm looking for? I've personally have witnessed the transformative power of education. That's why I'm such a firm believer in it. You know, before I started college, I shared on like the first episode, I didn't start till I was 21. Before then, you know, I was in an apartment by myself with, you know, sleeping on the floor and then eventually having to move into my parents' house just so I can go to college. And those situations or those circumstances that I had back then, I would be lying if I say are not at the forefront of my mind. And that's what pushes me as well to kind of go forward. Like, I know where you came from.
Yeah.
And I think, aside from like even being as internally motivated as we are, I sometimes think that those external circumstances have also kind of pushed both of us and light a
Yeah.
fire under us to, you know, achieve.
It did. And like I said, to kind of give the listeners a backstory, you know, I came from a 13 to 15 person household at any given time. I didn't sleep in my first bed until I think I was like my first year in college.
Yeah.
Right. I slept on the floor and the couch all my upbringing. So, you know, stuff like that, it is that internal motivation that keeps me going, right? Is never to kind of get back in those situations, never
Yes.
to put myself back in that type of environment, right? And I love my family. I love, you know, my upbringing, but you know, it's situations like that, like you said, that lights that fire under you. So a lot of people, and I mentioned in our last podcast, a lot of people see the finished product, but they don't
Mhm.
understand the work that it took to get there. So for me, I'm always pushing myself so that I never end up in a situation like that again. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my family, I love my, you know, my upbringing, but would I go back to that? No. You know, so I'm constantly pushing myself to go further. I'm constantly pushing myself to do better. And I'm doing that for not only myself, but for my wife and my daughter as well.
I think, yeah, like you said, when you become a parent and a husband, you know, as both of us are, you know, that gives you another different type of motivation as well. But which one would you say gave you more per se, the journey to get to where you're at, or where you're at now and maintaining that?
Dang, John, I didn't expect you to go like that. Dang. So you say what was the question, man? Dang, that was good.
Like,
You said
what motivated you more, the lack or fear of losing it?
mm. I would say, man, both of them
Okay.
equally. Because I think the lack of growing up is what motivated me to get started. That's what
Mhm.
pushed me. But maintaining is what keeps me going, right?
I like
So,
the way you put that.
yeah.
Keep going. I just want to acknowledge that. I like how
All
you put that, bro.
right, want me to start over?
No, just keep going. And I'm gonna leave that in there too.
All right. All right. You funny, bro. You funny, bro.
A few moments later.
So I would recommend that everybody goes out and reads this book, Start With Why by Simon Sinek, because it really does touch to your point of understanding, like, you know, what motivates you, what is your why. You know, my sister used to have this thing, like her business was called Control Your Dash. She's like, everybody's born 19, whatever year you were born to whatever year. And with that dash, what are you doing? Like, what is your legacy that you're leaving? Like, we both said, neither one of us, I mean, of course we love money, we like nice things, but
Yeah.
that's not what drives us in life. It's to leave that legacy for our kids, our spouses, and our family members. So I think, like, the measurement of a man or a woman is not how much financial gain they attain, but like the mark that they leave on the mark in the lives of others, over time. So I know that that's my why. And if I would have went with the career that I was originally going with, which was like, real estate appraisals, I wouldn't have been satisfied in that career because I know where my gratification lies now. And once you know that, it's really easy for you to continue to enjoy what you do and to have a fulfilled life. Because I think I said on like one of the other episodes, success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. Like, and if you're not
Yeah.
fulfilled in the jobs that you're doing, what are you really doing with yourself?
Yeah.
And it's never too late to pivot. It's never too late. So I think it's also important, when we're talking about motivation, to surround yourself with individuals who also help to motivate you.
I think that's important. I think when I was younger, though, I used to think that I needed all of these people around me to help motivate me to be this person or, to accomplish my dreams or whatever. But what I've learned is that my circle actually decreased in size, but increased in value, right? Bars, right?
Oh, yeah, that's funny.
I knew you was going to like that. Bars.
A few moments later.
For me, like it was important to kind of keep that smaller niche of people in my circle who motivates me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And some of these people motivate me in ways that the other person doesn't, right? They can speak life into me in certain areas, right? I might go to somebody else who may motivate me to, to talk to God, or another person may motivate me to, follow my career path this way or that way. But I think it's important to keep a small niche of people in your circle that all complements you in one way or another.
Yeah, I think that that's very important. And, I've never met anybody who's been able to do it all by themselves. It really does take a village, as the adage goes. But it really is important, like with who you surround yourself, because, and I got this from another podcast, my friend Amber. She said that when you're walking with someone, there's two things going to happen. Either they're going to gravitate towards your pace or you're going to gravitate towards their pace.
Yeah.
And it's like, are the people around you slowing you down or are going to speed you up? I think it's really important to make sure that you have people around you that are either going to be walking at that same pace where y'all motivating each other, or you got some people who might be walking a little bit faster than you and you're motivating them, but you never want to be slowing down or becoming complacent. So I think it's super important, like with who you surround yourself with, and like, people that are able to feed into you. And oftentimes you'll see, like, even you might have people in your circle who see things in you that you don't necessarily see in yourself. And just to kind of speak on it, like, like for me personally, I'm very highly motivated. But of course, I think everybody has times when they doubt themselves, doubt their capabilities, and things like that. So you need people in around you that are able to reassure you of like, hey, you're that person, like you can do this. And I know for me, my wife has been that. It's been times like, when I was going through that doctoral program where I was like, I don't know if I can complete this.
Right.
Those little moments of weakness that everybody has. We're all humans, and she was able to kind of motivate me to keep going.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. Like when I was going through, my licensing, it was those moments that you feel defeated, right? You need somebody
Mm.
to kind of bring you up to motivate you. I mean, there was times, man, I was depressed, man. I'm not talking about like super depressed, but just down on myself. But my wife was there to kind of like motivate me, to kind of like keep going, push forward. Like you can do this, like pumping me up. And I think you need that in your corner.
I think you always, yeah, you definitely need to have people around you that see the bigger picture and understand
Yeah.
what your vision is and help you to kind of walk in that. Like, even if I go back, as I mentioned, I started college at 21. And at
Right.
this time, like my friends, they were going to the community college as well. I didn't have a car. So they were still taking me, to and from school, coming picking me up. My friend Q, he worked on the other side of town, but he would always make sure that he came and got me for school and picked me up and took me back home. And it's people around you that are willing to make sacrifices on your behalf because they see the bigger picture, they see the vision,
Yeah.
or they see things within you that you don't necessarily see in yourself, but they support you in that moment. And I think that's what helps to
Yeah.
push everybody forward. It really is important about, who you surround yourself with and who you're actually getting, support from. Like we talked about on the last episode about mentorship and having people, once again, who are able to see something in you and push you forward as well. And I know you mentioned like, a couple of your mentors,
Yeah.
like just really briefly, just because we did have one of our listeners ask us a question about mentorship, like how important has that mentorship been in your life? Like, has it been as impactful, as one would
Yeah.
assume?
Yeah, because for mentorship for me, it's more than just a friend you can call up. It's somebody who guides you, who probably went through the same type of trials and tribulations that you went through, and able to kind of stop you from making those same mistakes. Like the mentor that I got, like I said, is Jack Thomas, is Wendell Garth, and people like that. Those people help me to make sound decisions because, like, I think you mentioned it earlier, where you need somebody who's going to motivate you to lift you up. And sometimes we kind of get hard on ourselves. And those
Hmm.
mentors are there to kind of bring and shape everything together to make sure that you still see what the end goal is.
And
Yeah.
and that's a good point. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'm gonna forget this point if I don't say it. So it reminds me of like, we've been talking about, we both have this common business, which was photography. And as a photographer, you're looking through the camera lens. So you see everything that's, in front of you, like in
Mhm.
the person that you're photographing. And that person that you're photographing can have a hair out of place, they can have a smudge on their shirt,
Yeah.
but they wouldn't necessarily see it. And that's how I kind of equate this mentorship as you're seeing someone and you're able to help them to become the best version of themselves. And as photographers, we're like, hey, move that hair out, or hey, get that smudge off your shirt. And there's that adage where like you can't see the picture if you're in the frame.
Whew. Yeah.
So
Whew.
with that, that's why mentorship is so important, is to have somebody on the outside that sees something in you that you might not see in yourself, that can take you to a place that you can't go by yourself, you know?
Bars. Bars. Man, yeah.
But it's so important, right? It's so important to have that mentorship. And like for me personally, I know that I would not be in my professional career if it wasn't for my mentors, Dr. Field, Dr. Lynn, Dr. Call, because they were the ones who were just able to kind of see me like as just a graduate student, like, hey, you have the potential to do this. This is how you can do it. Now walk in it. They gave you like the
Yeah.
layout. And once you have that information, then naturally like your natural talents and abilities are able to kind of take over. But a lot of times you need that guidance. And as you mentioned, you have those people who have gone through those trials and tribulations that can help you to kind of circumvent some of those things, overcoming some of those barriers, making sure that you don't have to go through certain things. And they always say like a wise man learns from his own mistakes. No, a smart man learns from his own mistakes, but a wise man learns from the mistakes of others. And
Absolutely.
mentors are able to impart the mistakes that they may have made to help you from not going through that same thing. And with that, I mean, since we're running out of time, let's go ahead and wrap that up here. But for our listeners and our viewers, if you have certain questions about any of the things that we've been saying, make sure to reach out to us. We look to interact with everybody and to get you guys' thoughts. Are things that we're saying, are they hidden, or is there other things that you guys would like to push back on? We're looking for that constant engagement.
And if you guys are watching on our YouTube channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. And if you guys are listening to it, don't forget to subscribe.
And this has been another episode of the Wolf and the Doctor podcast, and we'll see you guys again next week.